ahead and yeah. Thank you all. Whoa, thank you all for being here today. We'll get started in just a couple of minutes, but thank you for coming out in the cooler weather this afternoon. It's a beautiful day. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. And first of all, let's start off with a word of prayer, as this is both a religious life offering and an education offering. So, Holy God, we thank you for this time. We ask that you would be so present with us during this time. We just pray that you would just anoint Courtney and Ryan as they share and have fun talking about your creation and sharing about ministry. We pray this in Christ's name. Amen. So for those of you who don't know me, I am Pastor Kimberly Orr. I am the Director of Religious Life here at Lakeside Chautauqua. And today we have, as our special guest, Courtney Ellis. I'm going to wave. There we go. She is an author, speaker, pastor, and host of the podcast that you're about to witness the live recording of, known as The Thing with Feathers. And she's also a birder, which is why she's here this week, based in Orange County, California, where she lives with her husband, who is also a pastor, and their 3 children. And together they serve at the Presbyterian Church of the Master. So we want to give Courtney a warm welcome. Thank you for being here. And I will let her introduce her guest, and she'll just, away we go with your podcast. Thank you.
Well, thank you for having me. This is the first time we've ever done a live audience recording of The Thing with Feathers, so we're making history. Thanks for being here today. I want to introduce my guest for the day. This is Ryan Ham. Ryan is the global head of content for Open Doors International, an international organization that works with and strengthens persecuted Christians. Previously, he worked at Relevant Magazine as an editor and in Christianity Today's Church Resources Department. He's lived in Ohio with his wife and their 3 kids for almost 15 years. We also went to college together at Wheaton College. And perhaps most importantly for our Birding and Hope podcast, he has no idea what Ohio's state bird is. Ryan, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
All right, first of all, does anyone in the audience, can anyone help Ryan out? What is the state bird of Ohio?
Oh, well, that makes me feel good. We have a cardinal in our backyard sometimes.
Northern cardinal. We are going to leave this show with some education.
This is great. Because I also feel like you buried the lead a little bit. Because not only do I not know what the state bird is, I also have a bird phobia.
You do?
A bird phobia, yes. And we'll unpack this.
We will unpack the fact that Ryan is afraid of birds, and maybe pray for him near the end of the show. I did bury the lead. I also feel like we need to start by talking about how we met as students at Wheaton College over 20 years ago. We were back at our 20th reunion in September with our spouses and our kids. We both did our undergraduate degrees there, and now we're both serving in ministry, different areas of the country, and soon different areas of the world. So 2 questions to start the show, Ryan. First of all, how awesome was I back in college? And secondly, how did you end up where you are now?
Great questions. I think you were very awesome in college. I can confirm this for the listeners. I think you were one of those people in college that I was sort of both in awe of and like slightly afraid of. because you had much more confidence than I did at that stage of my life.
It was a show.
Yeah, it was a show, but it worked, so if that helps. I was one of those college students where it was sort of second guessing everything I did, and I wasn't quite sure. And I mean, I feel like you and your husband, now husband Daryl, you guys were very, very passionate about lots of things, and very clearly sort of like you seemed to know what you wanted to do with your life. Then we started hanging out more, and I realized that none of us had it all together, and that was reassuring in itself.
I really like that you took my joke question seriously, and then I just got compliments for the past 2 minutes.
Yeah, no
Thank
problem.
you.
Yeah.
More importantly, how did you end up at Open Doors? And tell us about Open Doors.
Yeah, for sure. So after college, as I mentioned, or you mentioned in that brief bio, I went into publishing. So I worked for Christianity Today, and then eventually Relevant Magazine, which was a magazine for younger Christians. And throughout most of my career, I've been involved in writing at various points. So, Courtney and I sort of kept in touch from a distance, both doing sort of writing. I think occasionally we would write for some of the same outlets periodically. And, most of my writing veered towards like spirituality or music or things like that, a lot of pop culture stuff. And then I got out of Christian publishing altogether. We moved to Cleveland, started a family. I was working for a business magazine. And then in 2017, a friend who I had worked with at Relevant sent me a text message and basically said, "Hey, would you be interested in this job working for Open Doors?" And I'd had a very bad experience working at a Christian magazine. I won't say which one. And also, it was 2017, so the election had just happened. And so my friend Brian called me and basically sat there while I said, if I didn't vote for Trump, am I able to come work for this Christian magazine? Because I was conflating the two things. And he told me sort of what the ministry was, and it's dedicated towards international Christian persecution, so Christians living around the world who essentially are forbidden or even in some cases attacked for living out their faith. So I've been now with that organization for 8 years. I've been able to travel around the world and hear a lot of stories from women who weren't able to go outside without a male supervisor to go to church, and so that caused all these problems, to people who had their kids taken away, to people who were miraculously healed, and just lots of great stories, and something that's really profoundly shaped and changed my faith along the way.
So I think as an American Christian, I've always lived in America. It is so easy to practice our faith here. It is so simple, and we have a variety of choices and a variety of options in most areas of the country. What has working with Open Doors taught you about being a Christian in America?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I grew up as an American. My parents are missionaries, so I did grow up overseas, but, it was very much in an American sort of expat context, and, I still was very much immersed in American Christianity, and I'm so thankful for that, and the witness of my parents, and the grace that God gave for that. But I think, we do tend sometimes to sort of look for persecution, I think. And that, it makes sense. Like, Jesus assures us that if we're following him, there will be persecution. So we're sort of like, well, it's got to be there somewhere. And I think sometimes that has, historically at least, and I'm including myself in this, like, sort of let us off the hook. So we might think like, well, we are persecuted in these really visible ways. And there, is some truth to that. But I think we sort of let ourselves off the hook for, like, sort of past sins that we maybe stayed silent on as a collective and didn't stand up in our faith, and that, we avoided persecution because we, like, kind of blew it. And I include myself in this. In Cleveland, this is visible all over the place. But I think what's challenged me is, like, it really is, like, no more radical than sort of just living out, like, the day-to-day faith that could even look very small in terms of telling someone about the gospel, or going to church, or daring to read your Bible, or tell your kids about your faith, or praying with your kids. It's like those acts can be revolutionary just as much as sort of the big stuff we think of. And those little acts, like, build up over and over and over time. And that's really all that I think God is asking for us to do, is to live out our faith in our lives, wherever they might be.
What are some ways the average American Christian, which I consider myself fairly average American, can support folks who are suffering from persecution in foreign countries because of their faith? Are there small things we can do? Are there big things we can do?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think, this sounds really cliche, and, I'm saying this as a person in ministry, and so, I remember when I was a kid, this kind of response might make me roll your eyes, but I promise this is true, is the first thing persecuted Christians ask for is prayer. And that's because I think, this is what I get because I'm an American Christian too, so this is hard for me to wrap my head around, is they say that they can actually feel the prayers of the global church in the moments where they're struggling the most. So you have these, profound stories of people in prison enduring, unthinkable treatment, going through torture, losing everything, and yet they say, I was strengthened because I felt the prayers of the global church. And I think as part of that, they also say, one of the most difficult things is when they feel completely alone. If you're a Christian in like a place like Libya or in Saudi Arabia, like you might be the only Christian that you know of. Like, you might think that you're the only one in your whole country. And so the knowledge that someone out there who doesn't share your language, doesn't share your culture, is praying for you breaks down all of those walls, and I think is sort of the perfect encapsulation of what the church is supposed to be. So that's the first thing you can do. The second is, you can pay attention to what's happening around the world. So, when you look at the headlines, you can always sort of ask yourself what is happening to the Christians in this place. So, Iran has been in the headlines a lot. There's a really active and growing church in Iran that is consistently oppressed. And so obviously they're caught up in this conflict just as much as, Muslim Iranians are as well. The same thing is true of Christians in Gaza or the West Bank. When you see things in Nigeria, there are lots of Christians there that are under oppression. So, the second thing is just to pay attention. And then the third thing is, as you're paying attention, you can ask your leaders, be that religious leaders or political leaders, to take action and also pay attention. So, sometimes there might be things that our country does that can either help or harm religious minorities like Christians. There might be international agreements that they could be a part of or not be a part of. Sometimes during trade that can come up. So there are ways to influence those situations through governmental and religious context too.
I appreciate that triple offering, because anyone who's interested can pray, but then there are tiers of things that we can do. And if you're a letter writer, you can write a letter to your congressperson.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's something that kids are often really interested in, learning about the church around the world, learning about where it's very different to be a Christian, harder, easier. So Ryan, I understand that Open Doors is opening certain doors for you to go back to Europe, where you grew up as a kid. Tell us about your next adventure with your family.
Yeah, so in August, we are planning on moving to Hungary, so moving to Budapest. My job is completely international, so I used to work with the US side, and now I work with the international side, and it's a great privilege to do so, because it means I get to meet people from all over the world who are involved in this work, and really, I think, we don't have a specific denomination, we don't have a specific language, we don't even all share the same culture, so you have everyone from, Eastern Orthodox to Pentecostal in the same organization, and it's like really beautiful. So in order to better facilitate that, we'll be moving to Budapest in August, where my wife will also be teaching at an international school. So we're very excited and very stressed.
My oldest child is already planning to figure out how he can get over there and visit Ryan's oldest child. He's like, I have friends in Europe now. Well, we wish you the best on that grand adventure. So the guests on The Thing with Feathers, we're going on 120 episodes now. The show has been going for over 2 years, every other week. My guests tend to fall in two different categories. People of faith who are hobby birders. There are a lot of Christian birders out there, people like Fernando Ortega and Kay Warren and Patsy Claremont. and then professional birders who may or may not want to talk about things of faith. So some episodes are just ornithology and learning about conservation and things like that, and other episodes are talking more about faith because the show is about birds and hope. But Ryan, you are neither of these. You are actually our first guest who admits to having a fear of birds. So unpack that for us, will you?
Yeah, this is difficult to unpack. So I'm not actually sure where it came from. I think it was inherited from my mom, who grew up on a farm, and she remembers a lot of mean roosters. I don't know if any of you grew up on a farm, but roosters are mean, right? You can back me up here, yeah. So my mom would tell all these horror stories of being chased around by roosters who would sort of peck and claw at her. So I think at some point in my, the deep recesses of my childhood brain, this took root, and I, began to fear it. And I think as I got older, I started to realize, wow, every bird, or almost every bird, has a different shape of beak and talons that can claw and rip at you. That's terrifying.
I have no words. So, we're nowhere near the end of the show, but at the end of the show, I always ask people their favorite birds. And I think maybe an even more interesting question is, what is your least favorite bird? Because I think that also shows something about who we are, what we're interested in. I love birds. My one and only tattoo is a bird. I spend all of my free time looking at birds, and I just can't with a Canada goose. I just can't. I'm trying to listen to something. I'm trying to listen to some rare bird in the bushes, and a Canada goose will wander right up and let me sing you the song of my people. And then you can't hear anything. They're loud and they're messy. So Ryan, least favorite bird?
I have two.
Okay, of course you do.
The first is the great hornbill?
Oh yeah, the African bird?
Yeah, occasionally one of my friends will just text me a picture of the hornbill with no context just because she knows it'll freak me out. So I'll get this and just, immediately jump wherever I am, and then she, sends a laughter emoji after that.
That friend isn't me, but now I'm going to also do this to you.
Fine.
Okay, glad we're clear.
The other one, and this also is, one of my chief memories of birds, is I was at Disney World when I worked at Relevant. My wife and I lived in Orlando, so we would go to Disney World a lot. And at Disney World, they have a lot of, I looked this up before I came so I could make sure I had the right species. I think it's an American white ibis, I think is the correct, yeah. And I know everyone knows what an ibis looks like, and I'm sure most of you are much more familiar about its makeup and genetic makeup than I am. But it has that long beak, and to me it resembles two things. The first one is, if you've ever seen an exhibit about ancient Egypt, they have those tools of the mummy set where it goes into your nose to pull your brain out. That's what the ibis beak looks like. The second thing is, if you've ever seen a picture of a plague doctor from the Middle Ages during the Black Plague, these doctors would go and they have this long beak. So this is, to me, is what an ibis is. While my wife and I were sitting at Disney World, we were having lunch, and apparently one of us, probably me, was scatterbrained and left some of our food on the table. This ibis sensed a opportunity, flew directly over our lunch, grabbed something, and I made some sort of sound that my wife made fun of me about for a year. So those are my two. But I will say, despite that, I do actually think I have some favorite birds as well. So I think it's difficult to be a human and to not immediately understand and intuit sort of the romantic, that birds are just very romantic creatures, right? You have these very splashy colors that don't exist elsewhere in nature. So the cardinal is a perfect example. There's a blue jay that comes to our house sometimes. There's an oriole. I know these are the most basic birds in the world, but to me they're very beautiful. I think they reflect what Annie Dillard talks about in her book Pilgrim at Tinker Creek. She talks about how God in his goodness has designed the world to be sort of more beautiful than it has any right to be. And to me, that's the example of some of the birds and their plumage. So even though they scare me a little bit, they are very beautiful.
There's an asterisk on the scared of birds, but And all three of those birds you named, the blue jay and the cardinal and the Baltimore oriole, we don't have those in California. So those are exciting to me. I'm out here and I'm, pointing at every one, and people walk by and they're like, yeah. We have occasional red-winged blackbirds, but not like you have them here in Ohio. One woke me up the first morning I was here, and I was so excited, ran out and told someone about it, and they're like, yeah, and there's 16 more. It's like... So I think that's one of the delightful things about birds is how regional they are. There are some birds that are all over the world, but many, many more are only in certain places. And if you go out and look for them, you'll find them in the same place in the trail that they were yesterday. My son and I walk every Monday morning, and there's a California thrasher that lives in one set of bushes, and there's a roadrunner that lives in another set of bushes. And he's not into birds, but he's into football. So we named them all after football players, and then he's interested. He's like, where's Saquon Barkley? He was in that bush the other day. So that's my tip. If you have kids or grandkids not interested in birding, just link them to something they like, and that's the gateway. That's what we're working on. So, Ryan, you shared one bird story with us, but do you have any other bird stories? One of my favorite birding writers, J. Drew Lanham. Do you guys know J. Drew? He's got a book called Sparrow Envy. He's an essayist and a poet, but he writes that everyone has a bird story. Whether you're a birder or not, over the course of your life, you've had at least one significant experience with a bird, and maybe it's the seagull that stole your French fries or the ibis that freaked you out. But do you have any other bird stories for us, Ryan?
I mean, I think, as a kid, I think the other bird that I'm not scared of, because I don't know who would be, are ducks, right? Ducks have really good marketing. I'm in a marketing communications, so this is, they have the best marketing. You've got Donald, you've got Daffy, you've got the Affleck duck, I guess, which is annoying, but at least sticks in your head. But they've got
friendly.
Yeah, exactly, very friendly.
Annoying but friendly.
Yeah, they've got these round bills, so they're not gonna, steal your brain. They sort of waddle, so they're like awkward but sort of enjoyable. So I think, as a kid, traveling, like we moved to Europe when I was 6. So, there was lots of different things, but I suppose in each of the places we visited throughout my time in childhood, there were always ducks. So you can always count on ducks to be there. You could see the ducklings swimming. I think ducks are a great reminder of, especially here in the Midwest, when we see the rotation of seasons, because they follow, in the spring you start to see the ducklings with them. You start to see them accompany, and then, over the summer the ducklings grow. But in these moments when all of us have suffered through this long winter, we hopefully don't have any more snow, although it's May 11th, so you can never tell here. We hopefully don't have any more snow, but now we can start to see new life arise, like small ducks and things like that.
Ducks are the best. In the winter in Southern California, we call it weird duck season because we get all these strange migrants, and some of them are hybrids, and some of them are crossbreeding, and so sometimes you can't even tell what they are, but it's a very fun season for us. And then when we get into spring and summer, it's just mallards. But mallards are their own type of delight, I think. All right, so we're talking birds, and we're talking hope, but this podcast would be remiss if we didn't talk about the other distinguishing characteristic of Ryan Ham, which is you are a bit of a coffee snob, yes or no?
Yes, it's true.
Bit of a coffee snob. And here's something interesting that I always like to talk to people about. There is something called bird-friendly coffee. Have you heard about this? Bird-friendly coffee. Yeah, the birders out there are nodding. So what happens is a lot of the places where we grow our great coffee in the world, Colombia, places like that, are now starting to participate in a process to grow bird-friendly coffee. So rather than clear-cutting areas to grow coffee beans or growing just one type of tree, which as we all know is bad for the soil over time, they are investing in bird-friendly coffee. So it's shade-grown, they don't clear-cut, they leave the biodiversity of the forest, and they grow the coffee in the shade. The tricky thing is it usually costs a little bit more because it costs a little bit more to produce coffee in this way, but this was not something I had ever heard of before I started birding, and it's a really great way to participate in bird conservation while doing something that you love anyway. I am not a coffee drinker. I, over the years, have had enough vocal issues that I'm not allowed caffeine or acidic beverages anymore. I'm a tea girl, but Ryan, I need to hear what makes good coffee, and why is coffee the thing for you? And now are you going to invest in bird-friendly coffee. The organization is the Smithsonian Migratory Bird Center. They do the certification process.
Okay, I'll have to check this out.
We expect no less.
Yeah, what makes good coffee? Well, there's sort of 3 different ways that coffee gets its flavor. The first is where it's grown, so you have different varietals will have different flavor notes. So stuff in Central America or Colombia tends to be like have more cocoa or nuttiness to it, whereas coffee from Ethiopia or Kenya or Rwanda tends to be much more fruit forward, and then coffee from Southeast Asia tends to be smoother and slightly creamier. But that can all be completely obliterated if you have a bad roaster. I've had, like, my favorite coffee is Ethiopian because I really love the fruit forward. It tastes like blueberries if they roast it correctly. But I've had Ethiopian coffee that's been roasted so dark it doesn't really matter what it is. But the third step takes place in between that, which is the fermentation and how it's dried and processed. And so that can have a big impact on it as well. But this is like very dorky stuff. So I acknowledge this.
We're birders. We like dorky stuff.
That's true. So,
Part of the brand.
Yeah. But, you know, I mean, like if you're getting good coffee, it's already going to be expensive because, like, really good coffee comes from like smaller farms, usually comes from individual lots. If you have, like, there can be very expensive coffee because literally a buyer will go to a farm collective and bid on one specific lot of one specific harvest. So, I mean, if you start digging in, it's like if you know people who are into wine or something like that, like it's the same level of passion that people put into coffee as well. It just doesn't get as much press, maybe bad marketing, I don't know.
Yeah, you got to get the bird people on it, the bird-friendly people
exactly,
on
the
it.
bird-friendly people.
Well, Ryan, what I knew of you back in college was that you also had great confidence. So we were both just faking the other one out.
Oh, that's good to know.
Which is
Yeah,
good to know. I feel like these are lessons to teach our kids,
Yeah,
that as
yeah.
long as you fake it well, no one will ever know the
Yeah.
difference. But you and I met at Wheaton College back in the day. We were just back there for our 20th college reunion, and Wheaton is similar to Climate in Ohio. You know, it's right on the lake, near the lakeshore in Chicago. So as an Ohio resident, what are you looking forward to as the temperature starts to warm? We're here, birding's biggest week. I'm here at Lakeside, Ohio, and I'm not an Ohio native, though I'm delighted to be back in the Midwest. So what are we looking forward to as Ohio starts to turn the corner, Lord willing? The snow is gone, Lord willing, into spring and summer.
Yeah. I mean, I think how many people are from Ohio or live here all year round? Okay, so almost everybody. So I suspect they will get a lot of head nods for this. I think that we deserve summer more than people in California do. Because,
I think that's true.
Yeah, and you're from Wisconsin, so you can back this up. Honestly, people in
I
northern
have suffered also.
Yeah, people in northern Wisconsin deserve it the most of all. Maybe Minnesota can,
I
vie
have
with
these
it.
vivid childhood memories of my mom standing at our big picture window in our house in October with her mug of coffee, just staring into middle distance, saying, "It's coming."
Yeah.
Like, winter is rough, man.
Yeah. But I mean, I think around here it's really great. The whole lake area comes to life. So I live in Cleveland, and we live about a block from Edgewater Beach, and slowly you can see things start to come to life. So during Lent, part of my Lenten practice was I would take a walk all along Edgewater Beach every day. And it was really interesting because you could start to see sort of the first brave people. So, at first everyone was bundled up, everyone just looked angry as you would pass each other. But then slowly, as things started to warm up, you could see the ice was literally unfreezing on the lake, and the ice in people's hearts was unfreezing, including mine. And I think, this happened in Chicago too, but I think everyone sort of switches from this sort of like dour despondency of February and March into this much
It's very
more,
hunchy
yeah,
for a while.
everyone's hunched over,
hunchy.
yeah. And then everyone gets excited. And then, I mean, the lake comes to life. You have people out on boats. The marinas really come to life all along the lakefront. Cedar Point begins operating. My wife and son are going to Cedar Point for a band concert next week, so they're very excited. For me, I love like outdoor eating. So all the beer gardens in Cleveland, like just explode. So we go there a lot with our kids. I love grilling, and we have a nice outdoor area in our backyard. So that becomes kind of our oasis during the whole summer. So there's nothing better than that first Saturday when you can open all the windows in your house and you can put a Guardians game on, and then you can take a nap.
And I just want to put a plug in for Lakeside Chautauqua. I've never been before. This is my first time here, and I'm having such a great time. It is a beautiful spot. It's great for families, and I'm here before even really the summer rush starts. So I got to preach at the Methodist church up the road on Sunday, and a couple there said, "Do you have a golf cart?" And I said, no. And they said, you will not fully experience Lakeside Chautauqua without a golf cart. Here are the keys to our golf cart. So I now have a 6-seater blue golf cart in my possession for the next 4 days. So if anyone wants to go anywhere, you just let me know and we'll tool around. But it feels like a step back in time in the best possible way. Anytime I walk down the street, people are saying hello to me. Anytime I'm walking into a store, I'm greeted. People are offering me snacks, offering me coffee. So if listeners out there, if you do not know of Lakeside Chautauqua, look it up. It's well worth a visit. And also put in a plug for Birding's Biggest Week, which is over in Maumee, Ohio. And I took a drive there this morning. And they're bringing in birding experts from all over the world. And I was only out for 2 hours, and I saw 5 lifers. I mean, it's amazing. It's raining warblers out there. So if you get a chance to come to Ohio in May, I can't say enough good things about it.
Yeah, Ohio's great in May. I'm going to my first baseball game of the season tomorrow, so it's the full, yeah. The Cavs are still in the playoffs for like 3 more days.
It's a good thing.
Yeah.
It's a good thing. And I live in Southern California now, and I love it. I love my church, love my husband, so blessed to be there. But there is something about enduring a winter that makes summer so much sweeter. It's a little bit of Groundhog Day out in California where you're like, oh, it's sunny and 70. Oh, it's sunny and 70. Oh, it's sunny. You know, there's no variety. So I'm delighted to have some weather. And California really is just warm and sunny, or it's on fire. So it is lovely to be here with all of you, and I've just really, really enjoyed it, and our listeners all need to check it out. So Ryan, you shared about least favorite birds, and you shared about the birds that don't scare you. Do you have a very favorite type of duck, or is your favorite bird not a duck?
Are there different kinds of ducks?
Ryan Ham. Are there different kinds of ducks? There we go. We could go into dabbling ducks versus diving ducks.
Okay.
We could talk about sea ducks. I'm going to send you some Wikipedia pages,
Okay.
and you're going to do some reading.
I like the standard duck.
Which would be what? Mallard.
Okay, I like a mallard then.
Standard
Yeah.
duck.
Well, I don't like the ones that are smaller because they have the sharper beak.
Yeah.
They can still attack.
You're going to have these pecked to death by ducks sort of dreams.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, mallard is good. We've had over 120 episodes. Not a single person has said their favorite bird is a mallard.
I mean, I feel like it's a very basic answer, again,
great
because of the
answer.
marketing. But I think, like, everybody likes ducks. Who
There's
doesn't
no
like them?
wrong answer of what your favorite bird is, unless you say Canada goose, and then we're going to have to, like, make sure you're not a sociopath. Canada goose, they're amazing in their own way, but also I like them. I appreciate them from a proper distance. Yeah, I like them from far away. So audience question time. I would love to hear your favorite bird or your least favorite bird and why. And it's such a fun question to ask my guests because I have, hobby birders who are people of faith, but I also have ornithologists. And I think that question, the answer to it tells something about the person. And so often the person will say, well, I'm sure this is everyone's favorite. And then they'll say a bird that no one has said in 120 episodes. But it's so dear to them that it feels like it should be everyone's favorite. So I'd love to hear, and you can raise a hand, Kimberly's got the microphone, if you have a favorite or least favorite and why.
I agree with you on the goose because I'm a golfer.
Oh, yeah.
And there's nothing worse than having to put your putt through a pile of poop. So, yes, I am in agreement. And I will say my bird story is I was out hunting with my father-in-law. I never had it. My dad didn't hunt, but my father-in-law used to take me, and I was looking at a tree. Something was strange about it. I looked, And I looked, and I looked. All of a sudden, it was like one of those pictures where the spaceship comes out of it. There was a big owl looking straight at me.
Yes.
It's the coolest thing I've ever seen.
Oh, I love that. That, in my experience, is how people find owls. Owls are such masters of camouflage, and many of them are much smaller than we think. You know, screech owls and things are like the size of a robin. Yeah, but even a great horned owl, they're so well camouflaged. That's a great story. Thank you for sharing. Anyone else, favorite bird or least favorite, and why?
Well, my favorite bird is a nuthatch, just because of the weird way that they kind of land on things. I always thought that was cool.
Nuthatches are the best. They just refuse to be the proper direction. I have a kid who's part nuthatch. You know, they're always hanging off stuff. And I'm like, what are you doing?
I have to say, I love hummingbirds, but also you talked about not seeing blue jays in California. I'm a seventh generation Californian, and we would see them a lot.
It
Especially
depends
when we were
on
in the mountains.
It depends on where in the state.
Yeah,
Yeah,
if we
up
were
in the mountains they
mountains, we
have
would see 'em a
Steller's
lot.
jays and scrub jays. But yeah, we don't have any traditional blue jays down in Orange County,
But
unfortunately.
most of those birds you've mentioned, I've seen in my front yard just this morning.
Yes, right. Embarrassment of riches and such beautiful colors out here. Anyone else? Favorite or least favorite bird and why?
I was going to say the nuthatch too. I always tell my husband, when I die, I'm going to come back as a nuthatch because I'm going to defy gravity.
I love it.
Love all the birds, especially the songbirds. But we have a story from being in Sturgis, Michigan for Thanksgiving. And a snowstorm came in, and we were on a four-season room looking at a bird feeder. And a beautiful cardinal came down with the snow behind him, and we all got our cameras out just as a hawk came down and slammed this. So a hawk's kind of not my favorite bird, because they eat their own.
Yeah. I do. I have a special place in my heart for raptors that only eat fish, like osprey. Like, that feels better. Just go fishing. Like, leave the cardinal alone. Yeah, nature can be a little bit brutal. Did you have a favorite bird you wanted to share? Is there a hand over here? Oh. Anybody else? We can do one more. Favorite and least favorite.
The red-winged blackbird. They're very aggressive. They get by their nest, they'll pick you in the head.
Is that your favorite or least favorite?
Both. I like them, but
Great answer. It's a great answer. One of the reasons I love birding is, you mentioned Annie Dillard before, who's one of my favorites and was herself a bit of a birder. She talks about how acts of beauty and grace are performed whether or not we will or sense them. So she says the least we can do is try and be there. And I'm always amazed when I go out and look at the birds, they're doing what they do. You know, they're just doing what they do. Whether or not I'm there, they're going to keep behaving in the same way. But I get to witness that, and what a beautiful thing, what a glorious thing to get to be a part of this incredible world that we live in that, like you said, is more beautiful than it has any business being. So thank you for sharing some of your bird stories with us. So Ryan, I know you've had a long and winding journey in terms of your own faith and some of the difficulties that came out of the 2016 election when Christianity got kind of politicized in ways that were really, really painful. And one of the other things I love about birds and birding are birds are the great unifier. You know, you can be in any place politically, you can be, you know, man or woman, young or old, rich or poor. You can have mobility issues or sight issues, hearing issues, and you can be united enjoying a warbler together. And I think birds really bring us together. And that's one of the reasons I started this show. The world was on fire, and my husband's like, so you're starting a podcast. And I was like, you know, like putting a little bit of beauty out into the world, even if that's just one drop in a bucket. Margaret Rankle, do you guys all know the author Margaret Rankle? She has a beautiful book out called The Comfort of Crows. And in it she writes, the world is burning, and we have no time to put down the water buckets. But for just a moment, put down the water buckets anyway. And then she writes about looking at a bluebird in her yard and how that gives her grace and it gives her hope and it gives her energy to pick back up the water buckets again. So Ryan, I always ask my guests on this show the same question at the end of the show, which is, where are you finding hope these days?
Oh, that's a really good question. Let's see. So there's a few ways to answer. So forgive me if I
Do them all.
Okay. So the first one is, like, because of my job, I get to hear a lot of stories of hope, and like hope in circumstances that, like, I have to chalk up to the work of the Spirit, because I can't explain it any other way. So one was a video I just recently watched that we've actually been working on for the past 6 months. I edited the story and have done a bunch of work on getting the story from start to finish, but I hadn't yet taken the time to watch the video, and it was coming out this week, so I knew that I needed to go. Like, I'd seen all the photos, but it was time to watch the video so I could like write some stuff about it. And it's the story of a Syrian family. And if you remember, last June, there was a bombing in Damascus where a bunch of Christians were gathered in an Orthodox church, and a person came in firing a gun and then ignited a bomb that left more than 20 people dead. And the video is about a family who was in the service that day. So it was a mom, a dad, and then their 5 kids. One of their sons was serving on the altar party that week. And they had footage from that Sunday in the video. So you can see their son, in an altar guild outfit, or altar boy robes and vestments. And then, you sort of see everything that happens. And in the video, there's this moment where it's their first time going back into the church since the bombing, and the videographer is there to capture this, and they're sort of talking about this. And at one point, the mom Hanane basically says, "Yes, of course we're scared, but we'll keep going back because this is our church." And that's the kind of hope that, again, it's what I said earlier. It's not like this radical step. It's just literally going to a place on a Sunday. But it's this hope that doesn't have any reason of being outside of the work of the Holy Spirit. The second thing that comes to mind is in our church a couple weeks ago, we had confirmations, which are basically like, if you're not from a tradition that does confirmations, or you're not a Christian and you're listening to this, is confirmation is sort of it's called confirmation because it's essentially the confirmation of your baptism. So if you think about a baptism as being, it's sort of like when you get a mortgage.
This is an analogy I've not heard.
Yeah.
Go on.
So baptism, when you baptize your child, it's like they're getting a mortgage, and they're receiving the keys to the house. They have the rights to live in the house. They are full members and owners of that house. But when you're confirmed, it's like you've paid off the mortgage, and you get the final deed, and it's all in your name. So confirmation is sort of like the culmination of the baptism process that starts, in our tradition, when kids are very little. And we had confirmation at church a couple weeks ago, and our bishop has a powerful gift of discernment. I don't know if you have, I don't know how many people listening are, have a charismatic background. I certainly didn't grow up with it, but it's something that I've come to really treasure and value in my church community. And so as each person comes up, he asks them as he does the confirmation, he says, "What do you want God to do for you today?" And he answers, and they answer, and then he prays for them, and then he tells them what he thought God was doing, or God wants to tell them that day. And it's, I've never made it through a confirmation service without crying, because it's really, really powerful to watch this man who, doesn't necessarily know these people, and yet he seems to say the exact right thing that they need. And at one point, there was a young man in our church who asked for, he said he wanted to heal people, and so he blessed his hands with the charismatic oil to bless this healing. And I thought, amidst all the mess of day-to-day church, the mess of denominational politics, the mess of people squabbling, and I'm indicting myself in this in some cases, is like you have these profound moments of the Spirit at work, and I find deep, deep hope in that the Spirit of God is alive and well and working in these places despite us, and somehow mysteriously rejoices to work in us, even though we try to screw it up whenever we can.
Whew. Well, that gives me hope. I think one of the things that has given me hope about being here is the opportunity for an Anglican and a Presbyterian to have a conversation at a Methodist adjacent organization with a bunch of birders and birder adjacent folks about the work of God in the world and the hope that birds can bring to us. So we're going to close the show, but then we're going to have a little time for Q&A after that you don't have to be afraid is going to go out over the airwaves. But Ryan, Ham, thank you so much for the gift of being on the show. And listeners, please do check out Open Doors. They do incredible ministry. It can show you what countries to pray for, what's going on all around the world. And pray for Ryan and Kate and their kids as they head out to Europe.
Yeah, thank you. I know I would say too, like, thank you for having me, even as a bird-phobic person. But I would say
we're very inclusive on the thing
yeah.
with feathers.
One of the things that I think I really value about the practice of bird watching is I think it gives you like a reason to be very attentive to like details and to pay attention to what's happening to you in the present. So, suddenly, my phone is in front of my face far too often. I'm sure lots of people can relate to this. Or, I'm consumed by sort of the minutia of my day, all of which has importance. But I think the power of something like bird watching or other practices like that, and this is why I'm encouraged like to sit with you and to hear from you and all of your experiences birding, is I think that is a really profound expression of paying attention to the creation that we've been given and taking time to just sort of exult in its beauty, not because it's going to serve a purpose or that it's going to pay the bills, but just because it's there and it's beautiful. And I think that's really profound.
I love that. Thanks, Ryan. I think there is something about that idea of paying attention. It was the mystic Simone Weil who talked about how attention is the highest form of prayer, paying attention. And I interview a lot of non-Christian birders on the show, and they say, I don't want to talk about faith, birds are my church. And I say, that's a great place to start. Let's talk about birds. Birds are at least partially my church too. So thank you all for being here, first live audience recording, and thank you, Ryan, for being a guest on the show today.
Yeah, thanks so much.